Hello everyone. As most of you will hopefully be aware, earlier this week I did a video about the Great Reset and found out that, surprise surprise, the elite seem to want to put in socialism to save the planet. However, calling it the Great Reset does have sinister overtones, so I cannot believe that they unironically use that name to describe what they want to do. But I thought that quick video would be enough for it, but it turns out it's not, because it's more open than I thought. And it turns out that, well, I've covered before that the government wants to put more green industry into the country, but they really came out this week and made it clear that there was no other choice going forward. And this is supposedly a right-wing government, by the way. But before I get into their idiocy, I want to go through this small website called The Great Reset. And it starts off with a little video that I think we may as well watch.
We have the power to capture imaginations.
That's some pretty slick editing. It's almost as if they've got pretty big funding behind this. I wonder who could be pushing this.
And influence how the world behaves. But we've used that power without thinking about its effect.
Who the hell's this we? This is literally just some random voice actor for now. I don't know who the hell's talking. But clearly you're supposed to be someone from the billionaire class who's just been pushing his money into advertising and fossil fuels or something like that. I think that's how he's supposed to be acting. Well, let's see where they're going with this.
Until we paused and reconsidered what was essential.
I do not like where this is going. I do have to say that this type of video really reminds me of Watch Dogs 2 with all the DedSec propaganda videos. It's in the same flashy style, and as I say, it's literally just propaganda. Obviously in Watch Dogs 2 it was okay propaganda because you were the good guys. Fortunately, people are gonna therefore probably associate this with being the good guys. Anyway, let's hear why capitalism's bad.
And for a moment, we only made what the world truly needed.
This is what I hate about everything to do with the Great Reset. There are absolutely no specifics. It is the quintessential I am against bad things and for good things, the movement. Nothing specific there, there's just implied things that eating meat's bad, travelling on a plane bad, things like that. And they don't really show anything different in this transition. There's just a bird at one point and then a load of people waiting in line. Please tell me what you are going to do when you reset the economy and society.
We now have an opportunity to use our influence for society and the planet's best interests.
I hate the way this is framed as well. What do you mean the planet's best interests? You do know that it is only people who have interests, right? That's because we are the only rational beings that we know of. So when you say the planet's best interest, what you mean is your best interest. You can't fool me by framing it as if it's what the planet wants or needs. That's not how it works, son.
Because right there in front of us is a great big blank page.
No, you do not have a blank page. You have a planet with 7.8 billion people living on it. You do not have a blank page. You have many, many people with interests that are beyond their control. It is what their subconscious is telling them they want. For instance, the food people like is not down to their personal choice. The type of person that one would like to spend the rest of their life with is not a blank page. It is informed by many outside forces and many internal forces of the person. And if you try and say that a planet with 7.8 billion people on, with millennia of history and many different cultures that are currently living on the planet, if you call that a blank page, you are an idiot. And if you try and treat it like it's a blank page, you are inevitably going to get people killed.
Our chance to use our creativity, to reimagine, to question what we influence, to reset the way we live. So pick up your pens, your mouse, your camera, write, play, perform, or whatever you do, and join the Great Reset.
No. I'm not going to go along with this blank slateism, airy-fairy, no specifics whatsoever movement you have created, because it will inevitably kill people. You have an ideology that essentially says, if we think perfectly rationally, and we really think about what we need to influence, and do good and things like that, no. I'm afraid to say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, And I'm sure, like many other social justice movements, there are people with good intentions there, but no, you're not thinking it through because you don't realise that humans are not perfectly rational beings. So trying to make a perfectly rational world is absolutely retarded. Let's get some specifics on what this website tells us. So why do we need to reset? The pause during lockdown created by a pandemic will result in a 7% decrease in global emissions in 2020. The UN states that we need to decrease by 7.6% every year until 2030 to avoid 2030. It's always 2030 to avoid climate and ecological disaster. Well, the UN aren't a climate body, so fuck them. This means we need to maintain the same decrease every year as if we're living in lockdown. Well, fuck that. I'm not being funny. I know that people in my area have been ending their life because they can't take the lockdown anymore. You know, people are lonely. People have been spending too much time in their house, not having a real life. And not everyone can live like that. I mean, I'm fine with that. I can just stay and play video games and make videos all day. And work from home, obviously. But a lot of people can't. A lot of people are extroverted. They need to go out. They need to see their friends. They need to do things outside of their home. And if they can't, well, they end up killing themselves. So I'm afraid I'm not willing to sacrifice these people for this pipe dream of reducing the emissions to quote-unquote save the planet. The challenge is that as we emerge from the pandemic, the pressure to go back to business as usual will intensify. But people don't want to go back. Only 23% of the UK public believe following lockdown, advertising should encourage people to consume, shop and fly like before lockdown. And that was a survey of 1,000 respondents, as it says at the bottom. So 230 people out of 1,000 said it. That's not the same as 23% of the public. 77% believe it is the industry's responsibility to encourage people to behave more sustainably like during lockdown. And again, that was the same survey, I assume. Yeah, I don't care what 1,000 uni students said during this lockdown. It's not the industry's responsibility to make sure people are living and acting morally. It's not their problem. It is the individual's problem. If individuals want this great reset, they are free to invest their own money into quote-unquote sustainable renewable energy and things like that. It's up to them not to consume. It's not the fucking industry's fault that that's what people are doing. Right now we have a small window of opportunity to reset and shape the future we want. Who's this we? You do realise that if that was we as in the general public, we'd already fucking be there, you fucking moron. But no, these people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Alright, come on, give me more propaganda. What is the Great Reset? The Great Reset is a creative industry movement to embed the positive environmental shifts that have happened during the lockdown as the new normal. Yeah, so they want to make lockdown the new normal. Piss off. Our industry has power and influence, but we need lots of people to choose to use it. We must grab this opportunity to help shape a society that puts mankind and our planet's needs first. To do this, we need to reset ourselves to become agents of change, not just passive receivers of briefs. Reset our work so what we create promotes sustainable values, attitudes and behaviours, and reset our impact by re-evaluating what we measure and celebrate as success. I mean, honestly, if this wasn't in a progressive bullshit bubble, I probably would agree with this, because I do think we need to reset as in go back maybe about a decade or so that we don't end up in the postmodern progressive nonsense world we find ourselves in. But no, they mean reset as in accelerate that. So this website also has a white paper on what they plan for the Great Reset. I'm not going to go through that now because that's not the point of the video. But this is nothing to do with the World Economic Forum, but it's funny just how similar their aims are, because this is not related to the World Economic Forum's and Davos's Great Reset that we see. This was made quite a while before they announced it the other week. I think this was made in July, and obviously the Great Reset of the World Economic Forum, that blew up a couple of weeks ago now, in November, I think. So it's just interesting how they happen to be parallel on, well, they're not even parallel on the name, it's the exact same name, and yet all of their outcomes they want seem to be perfectly parallel. It's almost like this was a kind of I think they were trying to push in the marketing industry, because that's specifically what this Great Reset website's all about, so which is probably why it's so flashy. But I thought I'd just reiterate exactly what the Great Reset was. And it turns out it's just a Green New Deal for the entire world. So let's see what the Tories have been up to this week. Sale of new petrol and diesel cars to be banned from 2030. Yet again, it's that same year, the year 2030. They seem really keen on that year being the year of the Great Reset. So we have 10 years, I guess, to fight this, and they'll probably push for it to be earlier. But anyway, the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans will be banned from 2030 and hybrid vehicles outlawed 5 years later, Boris Johnson will announce today. Diesel lorries will also be phased out in an attempt to meet climate change targets. There will be a significant expansion of grants for domestic energy improvements and new funding for nuclear and hydrogen power. Now, this isn't the first time I've covered Boris Johnson doing something like this. I think earlier this year, before lockdown actually, plans of this were coming out left, right and centre, and there have been reports that were going to ban the sale of petrol and diesel cars for years, but originally I think it was 2045 or 2050 was our original target, and it's been pushing back for years ever since, so no one should really be surprised about this. Hence I'm not that surprised, but this is just a really stupid policy to make. People will eventually move to electric cars. People are doing it already because they think it helps the environment. Well, guess what powers electric cars? Oh, whatever powers the national grid. What powers the national grid? Well, it turns out to be mainly oil and gas, with a bit of nuclear and hopefully more nuclear over the coming years. So really you're not saving that much on emissions at the moment buying electric cars. And I don't think that's going to change much in 2030 because it's quite the effort to completely change the infrastructure of a country, especially one that has been relying on fossil fuels for so long. I'm not saying it's impossible to change, I'm saying it's going to cause quite a few issues to try and change it over the next decade. Not only that, but it is going to cost people a hell of a lot more who want to buy a new car past 2030, because you've just taken out the largest slice of the market. So now demand's at the same rate, but majority of supply has been cut. And guess what happens there? Prices tend to go up. So what does that mean for the working class people who rely on petrol and diesel cars at the moment to get to their jobs? Because they tend to be the ones who spend the most time in a car getting to their jobs. But no, they need to be the ones to suffer under the Great Reset, it seems. Anyway, a 2030 ban on new combustible engine cars was a key demand of the Times campaign to cut toxic emissions. The Clean Air for All campaign, launched 18 months ago, called for Britain to become into line with countries such as Germany, Ireland and the Netherlands. Ah yes, Germany, the country that tried to get to 100% renewable and now are burning more coal than ever. The phasing out of the combustion engine, particularly in built-up areas, is regarded as essential to cutting air pollution, which contributed to about 40,000 premature deaths a year. I'd love to see that study, but the Times don't give me it. In February, the Prime Minister said that he would bring forward a ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars from 2040 to 2035. And now obviously it's gone down to 2030. So for those of you that thought that the Times was right-wing, they are literally trying to push for what Extinction Rebellion want. Thank God the Spectator hasn't gone that far. Mr Johnson will present today's measures as part of a job-creating green industrial revolution as he seeks to blunt opposition to the extra cost to households and businesses in the switch to a low-carbon economy, i.e. as we go through the Great Reset. And again, this was a massive part of Labour's manifesto, so as I keep saying, thank God the left lost, because clearly we have not just got a left-wing government. Although this year has taken a very difficult path to the one we expected, I haven't lost sight of our ambitious plans to level up across the country, Mr Johnson will say. My 10-point plan will create, support and protect hundreds of thousands of green jobs whilst making strides towards net zero by 2050. Again, pipe dream. Our green industrial revolution will be powered by the wind turbines of Scotland and the North East, propelled by the electric vehicles made in the Midlands, and advanced by the latest technologies developed in Wales. Wales are developing tech? So we can look ahead to a more prosperous green future. Again, these are guarantees you cannot make, as it appears that every time we are promised that the future will be green and more prosperous, we end up with places like Germany and Japan, where they tried it for ages and realised that nuclear was probably the best option to go with. You cannot please the green lobby enough. Please stop bloody trying. And even when you do try, reality will hit you like a ton of bricks. Right, well, we may as well have more details of this. So, there is also pressure on the Prime Minister to set out ambitious action to tackle the climate crisis as a host of the UN's COP26 summit, which was delayed by the pandemic and will now take place in Glasgow in November next year. Mr Johnson's 10-point plan includes confirmation of £1.3 billion for new charging points for electric vehicles and £582 million in grants to make them more affordable. So already that's just under £2 billion already spent, and that's just to make electric cars slightly more viable. Investment of £500 million to develop mass-scale electric batteries, so now we're up to almost £2.5 billion. An additional £1 billion, so we're at £3.5, to make homes and businesses more efficient, including another year's subsidies for domestic energy improvements. Again, they say they mean efficient as in they release less CO2 into the atmosphere, i.e. they probably it's probably something like putting in electric bulbs that are more efficient and things like that. But it means like energy efficient and things like that, which is all fine, but if they were more efficient, they'd be cheaper, surely. Another £500 million to develop new large and small-scale nuclear power stations. To be fair, that's one I'm fine with, although I wish it didn't all have to come from the bloody government. And up to another £500 million to test hydrogen cooking and heating in homes as a less polluting alternative to gas. But hydrogen also happens to be more flammable than gas. Then again, gas is pretty flammable by itself. But again, this is all like centralised planning stuff to do with how we are going to completely change the infrastructure of our national grid and energy consumption. Which, I'm fine with change. That's not my problem. My problem is that it's entirely ideological, and they are completely doing it centralised. Whereas if it were left to the free market, many different companies would try many different things to find the most efficient. Whereas with the government, all they're following is quote unquote the science. But I mean, amazingly, quite a lot of science is actually discovered by people who are not experts in their own field. I mean, I'm a geologist. Just look up the history of geology. You'll find that the father of geology was a chemist, and most people who have found discoveries within geology have come from outside the field. And that has been true for many discoveries throughout the scientific fields. People need the chance to try and discover these things, and a lot of the times it can be done through the business means or through research means. Yet the way the government wants to do it is completely centralised and completely getting government scientists in on this to try and find the best way that they can to have a more, what they would call, green industry. And sure, it may work for some of these things. I can see the nuclear power plants, for instance, being a good investment, but I don't think cars necessarily are. And they're trying to answer this by completely changing our infrastructure when there are other answers. I go through this in my first video on fracking, which I made almost 2 years ago at this point. But we can capture carbon and store it underground where oil used to be. And this actually might turn out to be a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient than just completely changing the industry within all our countries. But no, as I say, this is completely ideological, and all they want to do is have a massive reset, because they're going to go way beyond industry. If they find out they can make a complete reset on industry, they'll move out of industry. They'll go into all our lives, into all our societal values, and try and completely, as the video we saw before, try and completely rewrite on this empty white space that they find, or that they think they've found. And honestly, I think they will end up killing people through their own incompetence. But anyway, back to the point I was making. There you go. Thank God the left lost, because instead of throwing tens of billions of pounds at this, we're throwing just under tens of billions of pounds at this instead. Thank you, Boris Johnson. You are doing great work fighting the leftist Borg. You useless sack of shit. I really wish this wasn't just about cars, because they have seriously been going after petrol cars for quite some years. But it goes beyond that now. It goes on to warming up your elderly nan in winter now. Gas boiler ban for new homes in 3 years under Green Deal. Green Deal. Now the Tories have a Green Deal. That was Labour's policy. That is why I voted against Labour. What was the bloody point in that if you were just going to enact it anyway? Oh my lord. Gas boilers will be banned in all newly built homes within 3 years under government's plan to tackle climate change. The move, 2 years earlier than previously planned, was initially included in a 10-point initiative announced yesterday to help Britain reach its target of net zero emissions by 2050. The future home standard will require all new homes to have low-carbon alternatives such as electric heat pumps and hydrogen heaters and things like that. Although the reference to the 2023 deadline was removed from the official document within an hour of the times approaching the government for clarification, and its inclusion explained as a technical error. A government source later confirmed that the ban will be brought forward. It was supposed to be in there, the source said. There hasn't been any stakeholder engagement on it yet, but it's definitely the plan. Great, so you know how they all want affordable new homes and things like that? Guess what the cheapest type of boiler is? Oh, a gas one. Guess what all new homes are going to have? Oh, not gas ones. Make them more expensive. I mean, I'm not a bleeding heart liberal and always saying won't someone think of the poor and things like that. But seriously, if their cars are more expensive and their homes are more expensive, so if the place where they can live in when they're not at work, because bear in mind it will be poor people who still have to go into work even if everyone's supposed to be working from home because that's the nature of the jobs they have, generally. Honestly, if I was a Marxist, I'd probably be having a go at this type of thing because it really does disproportionately affect the lower classes. But you see, the modern Marxist is quite open about their disdain for the poor. All they want is to screw over the rich, and they think that the rich are exclusively people who are CEOs of oil companies and things like that. Therefore, this Green New Deal is good because it's entirely government controlled, and apparently the government controlling vast swathes of money, totally fine because it's for the people. Yet, of course, when people freely and voluntarily give their money in exchange for services to oil companies, no, that's a bad. I hate everything about this. And as if this couldn't get any worse, in a consultation document, the Ministry of Housing noted there may not be the necessary supply chains, trained installers, and product availability needed for every home builder. So, again, we've got a supply problem when it comes to the housing market in the UK. Yes, we have an immigration problem, I know, as well, but there's also a supply problem. So we can't build new bloody houses because, well, of a range of things, but now also they can't install the bloody heaters in because there might not be enough supply for it, there's not enough trained installers for it, and it's just not going to be available to the home and housing developers. A report by the Committee on Climate Change the same year said it is not feasible to ramp up installation rates of heat pumps straight away to the current level of gas boiler sales due to the lack of market development, but also because there is not enough qualified heat pump installers. And this is exactly why you should take these sort of things slowly. I am not against replacing gas boilers, I am against replacing them all in 3 years. When it comes to building new homes, is what I mean. And then why? Oh, it's because we can't end up keeping supply of homes up. So let new developers, if they want heat pumps to future-proof the house, install them, but let other developers put the gas ones in for the people that want cheaper homes. Because guess what? Lots of people in the UK want cheaper homes, especially me. Honestly, I had more articles to go through from the Times, but I think these two have just got me to the point where I don't want to talk about it anymore. Because as we saw in that banning of petrol cars one, it's going to cost the UK well over 5 billion just to try and trial the type of things that they want. And obviously that means that we're going to have to get taxed more. And in fact, Rishi Sunak has a plan to charge by the mile to fill 40 billion funding gap. So, you know, not only are you going to have to pay for a petrol car to start driving, you have to pay for the license, you have to pay road tax and things like that. No. Now, every time you drive, for every mile you travel in a car, you could be charged. And that doesn't even come from the petrol rates either, because majority of the price of petrol is down to tax. So according to the article, motorists could be charged for every mile they drive on Britain's roads under plans reportedly being considered by Rishi Sunak. Chancellor is mulling over the move to fill a £40 billion tax shortfall caused by the rise in popularity of electric cars, the Times reported. Road charges are currently limited to schemes such as the London Congestion Charge, the M6 toll in the West Midlands, the Dartford Crossing, and levies on certain tunnels and bridges. Under Tony Blair, Labour abandoned the unpopular idea of a national road pricing scheme amid fury at drivers potentially being charged up to £1.50 a mile. A petition against the plans reached 1.8 million signatures. I mean, this is just classic, isn't it? Something that was too unpopular for Tony Blair to put in. For the Tories, nah, just keep trying to push on this Blairitism. Just keep trying to do what Tony Blair wanted to do. That'll be good for the country. It's not like Tony Blair ruined it or anything. But I mean, this is just amazing. The fact that they've been pushing for electric cars for years, and they're even planning to ban petrol vehicles in 2030, this is going to make bigger tax shortfalls. I mean, this is the thing. The government is just going to do what it can to increase its tax revenue, when really I think it should be letting it go down. Just let people keep more of their hard-earned money and use it as they see fit. Because giving it to you appears to just keep pushing for exactly what people do not necessarily want. Such as more expensive homes due to gas boilers being banned. Such as cars being more expensive because you're literally banning the sale of them. And then you're in fact going to use this money anyway? That you are getting from people who are driving electric cars to pay for other people to buy electric cars. I mean, for God's sake, I just hate subsidies, I hate sin taxes, which is essentially what these are. It's just terrible. It doesn't get the country in any good position and just forces people's money to places where they don't necessarily want them and into places, as I said before, that aren't necessarily good for the country. I don't think it's good for the country that houses are now going to be more expensive and cars are going to now be more expensive. That could lead to a lot of people losing out on their jobs. But unfortunately, these moves are backed by the World Economic Forum and, of course, that weird Great Reset website that is after advertisers. But honestly, I don't think there's much more to go through here. The Great Reset, I mean, the idea of it is literally to get a Green New Deal for the entire world. And it turns out that Boris Johnson seems to be one of the leading figureheads to get Britain into a Green New Deal. And honestly, people call him a libertarian. For God's sake, get your heads on straight. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. As usual, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.